This video is made possible by our sponsors, AJA. We'd like to thank AJA for all their support and tell you to go to aja.com for all your production and post-production needs. Hi, I'm Gordon Merkel from Filmmaker U. At Filmmaker U, we create courses for film professionals to deepen and diversify your existing skill set. You can learn more at filmmakeru.com, or of course, follow us on Instagram at filmmaker_u. Every week, we interview a film professional to discuss their work, and this week I'm joined by cinematographer Jayson Crothers, whose work includes Chicago Fire, Black Creek Trail, and Cruel Summer, just to name a few. Welcome to the show, Jayson.
Hello, welcome to me. Thank you.
I guess, how did you get onto Cruel Summer? How did you get that start?
That's actually interesting because I did season 1 as well. So I did season 1 and season 2. I came aboard season 1. Kind of the short version is they had done the pilot, and then the show got picked up, and then COVID hit, and so everything kind of went dark for the COVID period, so to speak. I believe, as I recall, I think I was introduced to everybody actually through my agent, Dan Burnside over at Datner, who's awesome. Yeah, he made the initial introduction, and kind of went from there. Funny side story, I actually interviewed for the show twice. So I interviewed for it once, was hired before pandemic, and then the pandemic, when it came back, a lot of the people that had initially been a part of it had moved on to other projects. So I ended up re-interviewing for the same show a second time and got it a second time. So,
wow.
Yeah. And then season two was the same producers, Bill and Michelle Purple, Jessica Biel, and they're all people that I would go shoot the phone book with. So when they called and said, "Hey, we're going to do another season," I was like, "Great! Whatever the script is inconsequential. I just love working with them."
Well, so I guess one of my questions is, like, how did you guys tackle shooting then during COVID?
So we were one of those first shows back during COVID. Kind of feels like remembering the dark ages, so to speak. Yeah, it was tricky because when we came back, the COVID protocols were changing almost like on a daily basis. It's like, this is working, okay, this isn't quite working. So the first couple of months was definitely a lot of trial and error of like, okay, what was it like to work? First it was, everyone's wearing a mask and, a face shield. It's like, all right, well, the face shields weren't practical for some people. So then it turned into goggles. Well, what goggles are allowed? What goggles aren't allowed? What masks are allowed? What masks aren't allowed? How many people can you have on set at a time? We got into a habit of, we'd come in, block the scene with limited people, send the actors away, work on the set, kind of, usually everybody's working on the set at the same time. We were kind of breaking it up into, okay, you can only have a certain number of people on set at a time. So the different departments kind of rotating in and out. They used to come in and wipe the whole set clean from anything that was touched. Then we bring the actors back in. Everybody else steps off unless they're required to be in there. There's a lot of time during the shoot day. I think at one point we estimated we were probably spending about a quarter of our day. We were losing about a quarter of our day just on COVID related stuff. So yeah, it was a lot of time. And again, it was like every week it felt like something changed. It was like, okay, last week these goggles were approved, but now this week we're doing something different. And then the usual getting tested 3 times a week. Yeah, so it was just it was tiring. Production is tiring in its own way. It's even more tiring when you're wearing a mask and goggles. And actually, the weirdest thing is not seeing people's faces for 5 or 6 months. Like, there's some people, you meet them in the mask, you only know them with the mask, and like weeks could go by and you turn to see someone, you see someone in the parking lot without a mask, and you're like, "Who is that? Oh wait, that's my dolly grip. I've just never seen." Yeah, you're like, "Oh hey, I'm Jayson. It's nice to meet you." You're like, "We've been working together for 3 months." They're like, "Cover your mouth." "Oh wait, it's you." That still to this day happens. I still bump into people I've worked with, in very early COVID shows. We'll start talking, and I'll have to put my hand up and be like, "Oh, now I remember you."
I think what attracted me to color correction was the fact that we were like the next stage of cinematography. And the creative side was huge, trying to understand what was wrong with an image, how to balance it, trying to understand how to let the tools do what you want them to do. where else can the technology go? What else can we do? I'm very interested in trying to mold the image and create the best look possible, and whatever tools are out there, you want to try and latch onto them. I'm Eric Whipp, and this is my course on color correction.
Well, so I guess my first part of this question is, did you get extra time because of COVID to shoot? And then B is, how do you, I guess, help the actors get into a sense of their part if like it's so almost like an alien world where it's like, okay, you got to leave the room, we're going to clean everything. Okay, we're going to only certain people get in, and there's like all these weird rules around shooting.
Yeah. I mean, as far as time, we unfortunately, part of it, yeah, it's unfortunate with Cruel Summer, we didn't actually get more time to shoot. So it was just sort of it was one more factor into the schedule and how we had to build the show in terms of how many setups you could do, the type of setups, so on and so forth. Some shows added, an extra day of shooting to kind of accommodate those, the COVID safety protocols.
Mm-hmm.
So part of it was just, just adjusting the way we work and also like the pace at which we work at. If for example, this is by no means a specific example, but if, for example, director might be used to doing 40 setups a day, it'd be a conversation of like, well, yes, we could do that, but with COVID, you might get 30, you might get 28. So it's like adjusting expectations.
Yeah.
As far as actors, in some ways, I think it was beneficial in the sense that because it is inherently a less crowded, quieter set, just because everybody has to keep their distance. So I find oftentimes, sets, even of the best circumstances, sets can get, crowded and noisy. There's a lot of people trying to do a lot of things. So I think that inadvertently is a bit of a bonus. Also, we just got lucky. We had an amazing cast. So I think like everybody, when it came to COVID stuff, everybody kind of had to just adjust the way they were working. And I imagine it's the same way for the cast. Again, for us, it's imperative that everybody, cast and crew, feel safe, especially in the beginning. Now this is before vaccines. So now, everybody's vaccinated and has boosters, but then, it was a real fear. There were no vaccines. There was still a lot of misinformation. So I feel very lucky that, season 1 of Cruel Summer is the show that I did during that COVID time, because everybody was also very supportive of, we want everybody to feel safe. Cast was worried about crew was worried about cast. And so everybody kind of, in some ways, I know this sounds a little cliche, but in some ways it kind of became an odd bonding thing of like, oh, we're all used to doing production a certain way, and now we're having to learn an all new way of doing it. And it's awkward and weird for all of us, cast and crew. So we're kind of all in the suck together, so to speak.
Well, so like when you got onto Cruel Summer, what were the various, I guess, touch points that you guys used for inspiration for lighting? Like, were there other movies or shows that you guys sort of based the lighting off of?
No, it's interesting. It's an interesting thing because, the show's an anthology. So season 1 and season 2, the only thing they share in common is the structure of, a mystery thriller, 3 different time periods, and the show jumping back and forth between 3 time periods. But beyond that, season 1 and season 2 have absolutely nothing in common in terms of story or the visual language, which is kind of the fun of the show. Is that season 1 was creating kind of one look, and then season 2 was going, all right, well, we get to start all over. What do we want to do? Season 1 was interesting because they'd done the pilot. I wasn't part of the pilot. So with the pilot, that set some of the ground rules, because the show is, it's episodic, but every episode builds upon another one. So it's all the episodes have to flow together. So looking at the pilot was like, all right, there are some there's a general look that we have to kind of stay in the ballpark of. So that set some of the initial, I guess, kind of rules, so to speak, for the 3 different looks. And then when I came on board, it was, like, hey, this is great, but we want to expand it. We want to make the world bigger. We want to add more sets. We also want to be able to do, one thing that came up was wanting to be able to do more aggressive editing back and forth between all the time periods. So that out of that came a necessity of like, all right, well, we need to have three very distinct looks so that it's not necessary to add chyrons every time you add it to a new scene.
Yeah.
And as the show went on, so that was actually that was sort of the three distinct looks came about first and foremost from the place of, we want the audience to know when and where they are from the very first frame and not be lost as like, well, wait, is it this time period or is it that time period? And then in terms of what those three looks were, those came out of story discussion, largely with, especially like with Bill Purple, our producing director, of, hey, what do these time periods represent for these characters, both in terms of like who they are, how they're changing, how they're growing, kind of the emotional state of everybody. So season 1, that's where everything kind of came from. And then season 2 is the same thing. Season 2 was kind of going through and saying, hey, emotionally, this is where these characters are at in this time period. And then we see them in this time period, this is how everybody is sort of changing, and then so on and so forth. And then from that, like it kind of became a process of elimination of going, all right, hey, for example, season 2, Cruel Summer, we want this timeline to feel like, like a decay, or I think another ref, we were like what if, like a festering wound. So from that was like, okay, well, decay, rot, festering wound, what does that look like? And so we started kicking around ideas. In there, there definitely there's definitely artwork, other movies. Sometimes we pull frame grabs from, or open a photography book or an art book and reference something and go, it's something like this. But kind of, I guess the short answer to your question is, I don't think there was any like specific. We didn't look and go, oh, we want this to look like that movie or that TV show. It was more of a finding the approach, I guess, like a theoretical approach, and then going, all right, well, if that's what we want to look and feel like, what does that look like? And then as we started kind of honing in on it, then it became okay, so it's sort of like this. Let's find a reference so that we're all talking about the same thing. When we talk about the color green, like what does that mean for all of us? So we can all point and say a green like this, or a yellow like this.
Well, and because you said it's jumping around in time. So I'm wondering, like, for example, in season 1, it goes back to the 90s. And, do you try to light it like it's the 90s, or do you go to, the set decorator, the costume designer, and work with them with colors and then sort of visualize that to impact your lighting?
No, I didn't want it, because when you say like, light it like the 90s, that begs one of two questions. It's like, do you like a show from the 90s? Or did the 90s have like a different look? Photographically, in terms of like lighting and camera, we didn't look at anything time wise. We didn't want to say like, oh, it was the 90s, so let's put a filter on it to look like the past or something. With that said, there was a lot of time spent with the art department, with the set dressers, production designer, wardrobe, hair and makeup, props. Like there was a lot of discussion and a lot of involvement with every department to say, hey, these are the hairstyles that are appropriate. This is the type of wardrobe that's appropriate. There was some discussion like lighting fixtures, going like, hey, like this was actually a big discussion because nowadays obviously LEDs are prevalent everywhere. That wasn't the case in the 90s. So there was definitely getting into some locations going like, hey, we need to pull anything that looks like an LED out of here because that's not a time appropriate fixture. So a lot of I would say in terms of like the lighting and camera, the time period the 90s per se didn't have any influence on us. But overall, obviously it did with, every other department, the choices they were making. And then it was just a matter of, whenever we're looking at a new set, kind of everybody looking at it and keeping each other honest and going, wait a second, that was that something that was, common in the 90s? Was that even, what time, oh, wait, hold on. That was, that didn't come out till 1997. We got to pull it off the set. So there's a lot of everybody kind of double checking each other that way.
Interesting. Now, what would you say was like a scene that was really difficult to execute in the series, but that you're really pleased with the outcome?
That's really funny because usually when that question comes up for anything, I never know how to answer it. Yeah. Except season one of Cruel Summer, I can 100% answer that. And episode, I believe it's episode 5, where kind of the main set piece is like a carnival or a fair that the whole town goes to. The whole fair in general was really complex to shoot because obviously on paper it's like the whole town shows up at this fair, so it should be this massive endeavor. But again, because of COVID, we had a very limited number of background extras, and the location that we shot at had a few like carnival / fair rides, but was actually like an outdoor like swap market. So that entire sequence, that all the scenes that took place at the fair were exceptionally difficult because it was, there were literally certain directions like, oh, you couldn't pan the camera, if you pan the camera a foot to the right or to the left, you would see off the set. We'd run out of background. We'd have like a background cross by and then take their coat off and go back the other way. So there's just a lot of logistics, but by far the hardest scene in that episode, there's a scene that takes place in a fun house of mirrors. And that is by far one of the most complex sets I've ever shot on. And certainly I think the hardest thing we did the whole season. And also something that I'm very proud of. That was a lot of work for a lot of people. Well, so the way we did it is we went and looked at, actual funhouse, and we basically, you look at a real funhouse, like mirror, house of mirrors, and they're actually a lot smaller, or maybe just because, I hadn't been in one since I was a kid, and, now I'm 6'4", but I was like, wow, these are a lot smaller than I remember them. So we looked at a real one and quickly decided there's just there's almost no physical way to put a camera in there. So then it became a question of like, all right, well, we want something like this, but we need to build it, and everything needs to be flexible. So our production designer and his construction team, like everybody really rallied, and we just built it on stage. And it was basically everything was surrounded by, it was basically 4 walls of mirrors and then a bunch of plexiglass partitions in between, and everything could either be hinged and moved around or removed entirely. So the tricky part became obviously the time-consuming thing is, first getting a camera into place and then finding the frame, and then it became like a mystery of itself, going like, all right, well, this is the shot. We finally get the camera, we got the frame, we like, great, and then we start hunting reflections, going, okay, well, where's that reflection coming from? And you're like, well, it's a house of mirrors. So actually it's not over there, and it's not over there. It might be way over there. So when it came to blocking, it's like, oh, here's this character here. Okay, but we want to see the reflection over here. So that it became a game of, adjust this mirror, and adjust this mirror, and adjust this mirror. So it was one of those things like every setup felt like, it took, 45 minutes or an hour. It was kind of an uphill battle for every single shot. And also it didn't help that it's also a very claustrophobic set. And the lighting is, there's kind of this like slow strobing effect to the whole set as well. So I think over time, between just the mental gymnastics of trying to track reflections, the lights slowly ebbing, and just a small confined set, I think everyone started to go a little nutty. But it was one of those sets that when we were done, we were all very glad to be out of the set. But it's something I think we were all immensely proud of. I think it turned out great, and the crew did an amazing job.
So I guess I have one last question for you. What would you say is your favorite guilty pleasure film or TV show to watch?
Oh, such a mean question. Guilty pleasure show. I guess I should say, I still am. I was a huge fan of the show Supernatural,
Oh yeah.
like hardcore fan from the very beginning all the way to the end, which is
Yeah.
15 seasons. Yeah, like I was one of those like fans from the very beginning. I was like, this show's great, and 15 years later, I'm like, I'm still here. So it's definitely a guilty pleasure show. Movies, that's such a tough one because there's so many. There are so many movies that I love. I will say, keep going. My guilty pleasure action movie is The Long Kiss Goodnight.
Okay.
That's a movie, I think it's from like the late 90s, like Gina Davis as an assassin with amnesia. Like the whole premise is absurd. And upon looking at it, you're like, this movie is absurd. But yeah, something about it, like to this day, if it pops on the TV, I'm going to sit down and watch it.
Well, thank you so much for letting me interview today.
Of course, my pleasure.
And that's it for this week, everyone. Make sure to check us out at filmmakeru.com, or of course, follow us on Instagram at filmmaker_u. I'm Gordon Burkell. Thanks for watching. This video is made possible by our sponsors, AJA. We'd like to thank AJA for all their support and tell you to go to aja.com for all your production and post-production needs.